and welcome to our 2022 first session for the school year. We are super excited that you've joined us today, and if you're watching as a recording, so thankful that you have come to our site, and we just want to say hello and give you a shout out. So today we have with us Heidi Harris. She is an early childhood professional with a PhD in early childhood education from Walden University. She is an associate faculty member in the graduate level early childhood programs at UAGC, and she consults with Experience Learning, a curriculum developer for early childhood programs, to craft professional development and curriculum for the organization. Her passions and research expertise lie in the constructivist-based pedagogy of Reggio Emilia. And that's why I'm so excited for her to be here with us today, because she is going to share some of her research from her doctorate degree that focused on the potential benefits that parents identified when they enrolled their children in Reggio Emilia. And I am so interested in the Reggio Emilia approach. Sorry, I can't speak this morning. And so Heidi, I am super excited that you're here with us today, because this is something that will really help our students and other professionals know more about this approach. So thank you so much for being here, and the floor is yours.
You're welcome. Thank you. It's so great to be here. So as Tisha said, I'm going to explain and share a little bit about my doctoral dissertation research. So many of you may be familiar with the doctoral process, but when you obtain a doctoral degree, you are required to complete your degree with what's called a dissertation, which is just a long-term research study. And it's something that's really highly anticipated, I think, for most people who complete a doctorate, because you really want to choose a topic that is really, really passionate to you. And so, when I was thinking about what I wanted to choose for my doctorate dissertation, I was guided by a lot of my professors to just make sure that you are choosing something that you are going to be excited about, and that you want to make sure you're doing this for, a long time. So make sure you really are excited about it. So I chose the Reggio Emilia pedagogy, which is something that I just have had such a love for over the years. And so, like many of you, I've worked in the field for about 18 years, and 10 of those years I was in the classroom as an educator. And I worked in a variety of programs that were, high school. Yes. Oops. Sorry.
Holly, for some reason I can't mute you. Can you mute your can you mute yourself, please?
Sorry, I just
no, it's okay. Holly.
Okay. All right, I'll keep going. So anyways, I worked in, obviously a variety of programs that were guided by different philosophies of education. And what I just noticed over those years of working in, different centers like high school or creative curriculum, Montessori, is that the educational philosophy really did matter. And when I started working in programs that were inspired by the Reggio Emilia philosophy, I just felt such joy in teaching. And I also saw from the children that I was teaching such joy in them. And so just to give a little backstory of like where I started and how I learned about this philosophy. So I, an undergraduate, a couple of my professors talked about this style of working with children. And then in my first job out of college, I taught for a year in a program that was starting to learn about the Reggio Emilia philosophy. And I will give a little context here in a minute about what it is if you are not familiar. But I started learning about the environment and how important it is to, set up a classroom that is enticing and aesthetic. And so I learned that in my first job. And then I had the opportunity to move to Italy. This is a picture here on the left of the piazza that I lived in northern Italy. Right outside the piazza that I lived in was the River Po. And so I had this experience of living there, and I was really able to see how this philosophy of education was just so deeply embedded into the overarching Italian culture. An example of that is in the philosophy itself. Time is really seen as a process and everything's really slowed down. So children get the opportunity to experience things over and over and over again. And I remember going to Italy and living there for the first time, and I didn't know the language very well. I didn't know the culture that well, but I remember waiting at the post office one of the first times that I went to the post office there. And it was like the time stood still. Like nobody was in a rush, nobody was in a hurry. Everybody was just hanging out. Even the people behind the counter, and it just seemed like a social event. But it just reminded me of one of the main tenets of the pedagogy is just like slowing down and embracing time and being able to enjoy the process of learning. So all those experiences together, my time in Italy, and then when I came back, I started working in different programs that were inspired by Reggio Emilia, at Google Children's Centers, where this is a picture of me and my firstborn son visiting. I chose to stay home with my son after working at Google for about 3.5 years. But at the time, Google Children's Centers in Mountain View, California was really guided by the Reggio Emilia philosophy. They were researching it, they were studying, they were going to the schools in Reggio Emilia. And so I learned a lot from that experience. So after I finished and I stayed home with my son, then I was completing my doctoral dissertation. And that's what really inspired me to focus on the research that I'm going to share with you today. So just to give a little context, I know that some of you may be familiar with the philosophy, some of you may not know anything about it. So I wanted to give just a brief overview. It's hard to put into words, but we'll try. And I also want to share a short 5-minute video that can really help visualize what the schools there look like. So this is from the Reggio Children website. The Reggio Emilia approach is an educational philosophy based on the image of a child with strong potentials for development and a subject with rights who learns through the 100 languages belonging to all human beings and grows in relations with others. So that's really the main focus of the educational approach. And it started with Louis Malaguzzi, was an activist and educator in the 1960s. Him and some community members after World War II really wanted to create an early childhood program that really honored the thinking and the capability of children and really looked at children as co-collaborators in learning. And many of you may be familiar with what's called the constructivist-based theory, which just basically means that children learn through doing. They learn through active participation. And we know that many of you that work with young children, we know that they need to learn through hands-on experiences. And so some of these theorists here that are listed have guided the pedagogy and the main tenets of it. Also, there's what's called the 100 Languages of Children exhibit that was created in the 1980s, and it really spread the word all throughout the world and here in the United States for what this philosophy is, the power of it. And so now you see that some programs here in the United States are starting to adopt the philosophy. So I'm just going to click on this link and we're going to watch this video. That's about 5 minutes long. They do talk a little bit about study groups. So that's a part of what you could do as an early childhood educator or professional. You can go visit schools and study this philosophy for, I think it's about a week at a time with some of the professionals there to learn more about the philosophy. So I'm going to start the video.
Participating in a study group on the Reggio Emilia approach means being immersed in the values and the contents which are part of this city's municipal infant toddler centre and preschool educational project. It means going back to the roots and the origins of this project, getting to know its history and how it is organised today. It means going inside the infant toddler centres and the preschools. It means meeting with the children, and it means discussion and dialogue with teachers, pedagogistas, atelieristas, and the city administrators. The Loris Malaguzzi International Centre is home to these study groups. And this is where you can discuss educational ideas with other people from all around the world. Projects, pathways, processes are all shared and directly illustrated by the people involved with the children every day. You can hear about the culture of the atelier, experiment with it and discuss it with others. Study groups are always different, always new. They offer education specifically designed for each group, depending on the profiles of the participants, their provenances, their languages, and the numbers. And there are different lengths of study groups, which can engage in a deeper examination of a great variety of specific themes. Our objective is to offer people a general framework and also to highlight a series of theoretical values which are referenced here in Reggio Emilia. This is precious background for reading and understanding a reality which is filled with stimulus and which generates new questions. Study groups are a unique opportunity for personally taking part in an experience that is growing and renewing with every day that goes by.
All right, so I love watching that video. I watch it so many times, but I just think there's so many things to pull out from it. But the video focused a little bit on the study groups that they offer for professional development there in Reggio Emilia, but also just the images. All those images are of the programs themselves. And so I think it just really helps to visualize what the programs are look like, what their values are. And so yes, now we're going to move into, I'm going to share the themes that were a result of my my research. So the research question that I focused on was, what were the associated benefits that parents perceived were achieved after they enrolled their children in a Reggio Emilia inspired program? So, I knew that I wanted to focus my dissertation on Reggio Emilia, but I wasn't sure exactly what avenue I wanted to go. So if you've conducted any type of research study, you know that you want to always look for a gap in the literature, which just basically means there hasn't been a lot of other research studies conducted on your topic. So there wasn't a lot looking at what were the families saying about their experience after they enrolled their child in a Reggio Emilia inspired preschool in the American Midwest. So I found program called Building Blocks Preschool in Highland, Michigan. I live in Michigan, and I wanted to find a program where I was able to go and conduct this study. And this program has been inspired by Reggio Emilia, I believe, for now like 14 or 15 years. This is some of the staff, and I will mention that I've presented with the owner, which is Suzanne right here in the picture before, and she's given me the right to share this presentation as well here. So the program has been following Reggio Emilia, studying it. And when I looked at where I was going to collect my data, I wanted to make sure that it was a program that was really following the main tenets of Reggio Emilia, not just, saying they were doing it on paper, but really doing it in practice. And I will mention too, and anybody who, have studied Reggio Emilia will tell you that this is not a type of philosophy, which can be a criticism sometimes of some people, that you can just take and copy and paste. And really the creators of the Reggio Emilia pedagogy will tell you that because it's so deeply embedded in the history of the Italian culture, they purposely want to make sure they honor that, and that they want programs to learn from them, but to also make it their own. So that's what this school here did. I found 5 parents who were willing to, I conducted interviews with, and I spoke to them and took interviews for probably about a year, an hour and a half each. And then I coded the studies, the interviews, and really looked at like what were the main things that the families were saying. And I came up with 10 themes that I'm going to share next. I just wanted to stop and, try to make this relevant to you who's watching. So these are some reflective questions that as I move through these 10 themes that I was able to find, I would like you to think about. And I know we'll have, and we'll end with questions, but you don't have to share them. I just want you to be thinking about them as I move through. So the first one is, what stands out to you as most significant of each theme that parents perceived as beneficial, and why? So what is your role in this theme? I know some of you may be professors, some of you may be students, some of you may be educational staff. So thinking about your specific role. And then wherever you are in your journey in the field of early childhood, what aspects of the Reggio Emilia foundations are you most drawn to, and how could you incorporate them into your everyday practice? All right, so theme 1, I think, we saw in that video, it really highlighted this concept that one of the main tenets of the philosophy is that creative opportunities are offered to children all the time. And there is an inclusion of it, what's called an atelier, and that's a studio space, as well as mini studios are offered in the classroom. So that just means that there's paint offered to children. There's, any type of thing that you could think about that children could experience and express themselves with. There's also this concept of the 100 languages, which just means that children, we know that everybody learns differently, right? Even you and I, we all learn in a different way, and we all have a different way of expressing that. And so we want to make sure we are offering children the opportunity to be able to do that in their own unique way. So theme 2, individualized care and learning. One of the things that Reggio Emilia really focuses on is building relationships from the educator to the child, relationships from the educator to the families, relationships as a whole, and also as a community. And so This is what some of the families were saying that I interviewed. You will notice that there's like quotes. These are all pseudonyms, so just to protect the privacy of who I did take the interviews from. But I like this quote from Marshall. It says, "The teachers have expectations, but they are different for each student. They make individualized goals for each student. The teachers make sure every child is taken care of and is progressing on their individual goals." So they see children and through their strengths. This photo, I believe Suzanne said that this child was working on being able to control and regulate her emotions. And so I'm sure many of you are doing this in your programs as well, but really the teacher taking the time to dictate some of the strong feelings she was having, giving her opportunities to be able to express that through her drawings, and working on setting some goals with her and her family to help her to be able to have more self-regulation. Theme 3, interest, inquiry, and project-based learning. Another thing that most people probably know if they don't know a lot about Reggio Emilia is that there is a project-based element to the learning. So you're never going to find like a predetermined curriculum, like, okay, we're going to learn about this on this day. It's really following the children's interests, emergent curriculum. These photos here are from a study that one of the young preschool classrooms did for a majority of the year, because they were really interested in like the movement of bodies and how and why their bodies moved in a certain way. And so the teachers really started asking questions and wondering with them. And this became a long-term project that they worked on for majority of the year. So theme 4, communication and making learning visible through documentation. Another element of the pedagogy is that we make learning visible through documentation. So these are just some examples of how Building Blocks does it at their program. On the right is what's called learning stories, and they try to share these with families each and every day. And so they have the visual component, and they also have the written communication component that just shares a little bit about what the children are doing in each classroom each day. There's also more documentation pieces that are created along maybe a longer period of time. And so if there was a specific project that the children are learning about or working on, some of the educators in the room might create that and put that out on the display for the children and the families in the community to see. So theme 5, classroom environment and choice of materials. Another thing that, the Reggio Emilia philosophy, if you don't know much about it, you probably know that the environment is known as the third teacher. And so really crafting the environment in a way that is aesthetic, that values the children in the classroom, that is going to be offering some of those projects that the children are working on. You're going to be offering materials that reflect those interests, and it needs to be done in a way that children are drawn to, and taking into consideration things like, the amount of materials that are produced and that are put out, depending on the developmental levels of the children, the ability levels of the children, the ages of the children, all of those things. I remember one parent that I interviewed, she shared that she toured about 3 or 4 different programs. And she said when she walked into this program and she just saw the environments, the classroom environments, she said, I don't want to go anywhere else. This is like a magical place. Theme 6, educators' approach to teaching. And I think, the video that I shared in the beginning really spoke to this concept of teacher as a researcher. So one of the things that's really a fundamental principle of the philosophy is that the teachers come in and they're asking questions and they're wondering right along with the child. So this is an image on the left where some of the educators at Building Blocks were attending a professional development, and they were learning about the elements of clay so they could go back in the classroom and they could learn alongside the children. And so it's this concept that, is the base of constructivist theory, scaffolding, right? Vygotsky, we've heard of Vygotsky and his work on scaffolding. You're going to be meeting the child where they are, and you're going to be taking them to that next level by coming alongside of them and doing it. So theme 7, viewing children as capable. This image is just a really powerful one, and one that I really saw when I went to this program and when I've worked in other Reggio Emilia programs, is that giving children opportunities to show their capabilities, and it might be in the form of taking risks physically, but it also is, viewing children as capable in the way we talk to children. I remember one of the parents saying, the way that the educators speak to my child is just so respectful and gives them the ability, that shows them that they care about them and that they want to hear their voice and they want to listen to them. And so that's one of the things, if you study the Louis Malaguzzi, who was the co-founder of this philosophy, is that his really the main focus that he wanted to bring about in a child care program was that we saw children as strong and capable. So theme 8, authentic relationships and social emotional development. So, most of us are aware of the importance of providing a holistic approach to learning, especially in the early years. And this is a value as well from the Reggio Emilia philosophy, and something that Building Blocks was putting into practice. So giving children the opportunity to be able to express their emotions and to learn social skills, to problem solve. One of the families shared with me that one of the classrooms was having difficulty with a really cliquey group of 5-year-old girls, which I'm sure many of you that have worked in 5-year-old classrooms can see how that happens very easily. And these group of children have been together since infancy. So they were not as keen on inviting people in, new children that had joined. They were not being as inclusive as they should be. And so the educators responded to that by having what they called, I think, like some type of meeting. And they were doing this over time, daily, where they met with these children and they met with some of the other children that were having a hard time with it, and they problem solved together. And they said that this took quite a while, and they continued to meet in a group, but they wanted to honor the children that had this bond, but they also wanted to start to think about how can we make these children who haven't been in this program a part of our program. And so just addressing some of those issues that are hard to address, but that are really important, and they do honor the social and emotional development of the child. So theme 9 is that the children learn through doing. So we know that constructivist based learning means that exactly that, right? Children learn through being an active participant. And so making the learning hands-on. So you can see through these images that, children are experiencing these materials. They're able to put that into their mind. And this is an example on the left-hand side for my children. This last year, they were really interested in volcanoes. And I think they saw a clip about Pompeii with my parents one day. And so then this really was an impetus for learning for the next few months. And so we did our best to experience what it was like to learn more about volcanoes through doing. And they created volcanoes out of clay, and we sung songs about volcanoes. And so thinking about, as an educator, how do we support children's interests in a way that they can actually be doing the work through their hands and through their bodies. And one of the parents, this is their approach, and it's sort of really summing it up. It's not just here's a piece of paper and write an A. It is making meaning and building upon those ideas that the children already have, explaining that knowledge and bringing it to another form through action. And so the final theme was that the children were offered nature and outdoor classroom experiences. And again, going back to that video that I shared in the beginning, those toddlers in the very end of the video were children that attended the Reggio Emilia programs in Reggio Emilia, Italy. And one of the main components as well of this philosophy is that we want children to be out in the world. We want them to be experiencing their communities. And I would say that that is a part, I think, more of like the Italian culture at large. When I lived there, I loved that like literally every single Saturday and Sunday, you just went to the piazzas and families and people and the community members just were together. And so we don't probably have that as much here in the United States, but I think we can still think about how we can invite children into the spaces that are surrounding them. Which is, we hear the term, which is called place-based learning. And that's what the Building Blocks Preschool has really done. They have a really heavy component on nature-based learning, and their program butts up against this preserve. It's a state-owned preserve. And the educators there have really embraced that space, and they take the children there daily. And so that's something that we want to continue to think about, is that how rich are these experiences outdoors, and thinking about the outdoors is an extension of the indoor classroom. So I'm going to end with resources, and I want to come back to the reflective questions that we started with. And again, just as a way for you to make this relevant to your practice. And I know sometimes I hear that it's hard for people who, are really excited about this philosophy and really want to maybe do it and adapt some of these ideas, but they don't really know where to start. And I remember feeling that way too as well. But I want to encourage you that you can start somewhere. And even if you work in a program that isn't fully inspired by Reggio Emilia, you can adopt some of these philosophies. I remember starting with just switching out the plastic tubs in our classroom to baskets, and just starting in small. And that's part of the process of the Reggio Emilia philosophy that they will tell you too, is that these programs in Reggio Emilia, you look at them and you're just like awe-inspired by them, and you might feel defeated. But what they'll tell you is, we've been working and studying on this for so many years, and it does take time. So thinking about these reflective questions and thinking about how you can implement these ideas that I just shared into your own practice, if you feel led to. So I'm going to end with sharing a little bit about, like, if you want access to this, you want to figure this out, but you're not really sure where to start. So a couple starting places that I would say, North American Reggio Emilia Alliance, which is NARIA for short, is, and I will share this, I believe this is going to be on YouTube, so you'll have access to this presentation when we're done. So you can have access to this, but you can always email me as well if you have specific questions, and I have that on my last slide. But the Reggio Emilia Alliance, you can become a member, and it's really just for professionals that are wanting to know more about the philosophy. There's so many links to professional development. I also want to share that there's a job search, and you don't have to be a member to do that. But if you're interested in maybe finding a program that's inspired by Reggio Emilia that you would like to work at, you can find that function from the main website. There's also a list of all early childhood programs that have identified themselves as following Reggio Emilia. Again, be careful. Some of them may say they are, but really in practice, they're not really researching it and studying it, but there's a lot of great resources there. Also for like where you could start, like book wise or resource wise, I would say these two would be where I would start with. Now this indications of preschools and infant toddler centers, this is a pamphlet, basically. I have it right here. There's about only 20 pages on it, but it really shares the really core fundamental principles of Reggio Emilia, Italy. So if you're thinking like, okay, what are like the main tenets? this is what you're gonna want to access. There's also this book that I've read many times. It is pretty dense, but it's created and written by the professionals, the educators in Reggio Emilia, Italy, and so much content and information for that. There's also Boulder Journey School, which is in Boulder, Colorado, and they are really highly regarded here in the United States for following the philosophy. If these books are interesting to you, you can go at the Reggio Children website, which is also a website that is from Reggio Emilia, Italy, that shares more about some of those study tours that they talked about as well. And then the video that I shared in the beginning, this is the video that is the last link there. And so this is the end of my presentation. This is my contact information if anybody has any questions that they wanted to send to me. But it has been a pleasure, and I'm really thankful that I got to be here today, and thank you for listening.
Heidi, this was amazing, and I'm really into the Reggio Emilia approach along with Montessori. So for our students who would be watching this later or who are here today, what are the big differences between Reggio and Montessori? Can you give us a little bit on that?
Yes, that's a great question. I know my husband always is telling people if they ask about like the Reggio Emilia approach, he's like, oh, it's like Montessori. I'm like, well, not really, but it is. I mean, the main, I guess there is similarities in the fact that they both started in Italy. And I would say the main difference is that Montessori, and this is sort of off the cuff, and I'm sure there's a deeper explanation to it, but from my experience and my perspective, Montessori is a little bit more directive in specific materials are laid out in the environment that children are, invited to use that are not as, I would say, like authentic or organic as like a Reggio Emilia classroom. Because in Reggio Emilia, you're really following the interests of the child. So you go into a classroom in Reggio Emilia and it's going to look different based on the interests of the children. But if you go to an environment, a Montessori environment, if you're going to those like the primary grade level in Montessori, you're going to see the same type of materials offered. Also, I would say the main difference is that Montessori is more not as focused on like the social emotional development. I guess I would say in my experience with that, like problem solving and working together. A lot of the work is independent. So children are expected to work on a task, sort of on their own versus in the Reggio Emilia philosophy, it's a little bit more like collaborative and focused on that. So those I would say would be the main differences, but yeah, I guess that's what I have to share, but I'm sure there's more to it too.
Yes, and that's perfect. And a lot of the things you were saying, I was kind of thinking while you were presenting, but then there was somebody in the chat that asked, what about Waldorf?
Okay. Yes, that's a great question too. And I'm not as familiar with Waldorf. I know that Rudolf Steiner is the creator of that. And it's, my children did attend like a small like program locally. Again, I think the Waldorf is really a little more focused on like the creative piece and like I know spiritual piece. There's some of that in. I just remember when I attended these programs with my children with Waldorf, we sang a lot of songs. Music was a big component. I think again, I don't know, maybe not as much like following the children's interests, but maybe there's more of like a predetermined curriculum that is set, I think, and that may be the big difference there.
Perfect. I love it. Heidi, this has been wonderful. There's someone else in the chat. Let's see. Great information. Somebody sharing a story. Does anybody else have any questions for Heidi? She is always full of wonderful information. She has presented for us several times. Going to be on our podcast. So make sure you listen to that. Super excited. But if not, I don't want to take up everybody's time and you can have some of your time back. But if so, go ahead and type in the chat and we'll stay on for just a couple of minutes. But otherwise, we're finished. And Heidi, thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much.